Okay, good. Good to see everyone out there. Yeah, I'm so happy you guys are going to indulge me in one of my Zen talks, Dharma talks. So we're gonna try something a little ambitious, maybe, but it's really important to talk about this and try at least to get to that. I'm gonna talk about the nature of reality. Now, to do that, it just seems, well, why don't you just talk about what happens around you? But it's not like that. In Zen, we have some great masters out there, and we have Eihei Dogen, who has written the Genjo Koan, which I believe, Chris, have you talked about this one before?
It's kind of a conversation.
Yeah. And I know Spencer gave a talk on it, I believe, right? At some point.
I don't,
I don't recall, but I do kind of remember that being talked, that name going around. Now, this is a very famous one because Dogen, our Zen master from Japan, from 1200 AD, really nailed a lot of things down back then, if you could call it nailed down. But when we talk about reality, it is the thing that comes up in society a lot these days. Whose reality are we talking about? You can turn on the news and you can find several different realities of the same subject. You can talk to a person and find all sorts of different realities, beliefs, and opinions there. But when we talk about the nature of reality, we're really talking about, in many ways, the nature of consciousness, because you can't really have one without the other. Um, so, what we perceive. Now, Dogen has talked about this. And let's see if I've got my notes here, which I should be able to pop up just really quickly here. Yes, non-duality, intimacy, and enlightenment. I use this from Domio, who has a wonderful podcast online, which breaks these down. And I thought, well, we'll just talk about reality. It'll be pretty quick, right? Well, this whole koan is, I don't even know how long it is, but it can't be broken down to a whole season of lessons. Inch by inch, you can go through each line to find some meaning, to find some understanding uh, about reality and where it does lead. But basically, I want to go over what the intersection of the two aspects of reality in Zen and Buddhism, the one, our individual, which is relative, and the universal, which is absolute. So these are two things that are difficult to hold into your mind at one time because we swim around in the relative. Everybody, the society, science, physics, uh, politics, just to be able to have, let's say, eat a dinner. These simple things go through the relative, all through the relative. And yet, lurking around somewhere, we're told by our Zen masters that the absolute is lurking around there someplace in this that we could manifest or we could see, we could understand, we could realize. So let's go on into, let's see, the first line of of the Genjo Koan. It has three statements about life, reality, each from different dharmic perspective. The first one is, when all dharmas are Buddha Dharma, there is delusion and realization, practice, life and death, Buddhas and living beings. So, what does that exactly mean when we talk about, well, all dharmas are Buddha Dharma? There is delusion and realization, practice, life and death, Buddhas and living beings. We're in the realm of opposites. We're in the realm of duality. And we all know duality it's really easy. We talk about it all the time in our Zen talks. You can't have one without the other. It's the front of one foot, the back of the other foot, or let's say the front and back of your hand, such as front, back. You can't have either one without it. So in Mahayana, we learn a lot about emptiness. And from this emptiness, we get the next line. When the 10,000 dharmas are without a fixed self, there's no delusion and no realization, no Buddhas and no living beings, no birth and no death. From emptiness, from having no thoughts, from having no sense of time, no sense of context, everything is not relative anymore. Everything is opened up. I think we are pretty much creatures of time. We're captured by time. The way our minds work are committed to time. Time is a concept. Time seems to be emerging from reality, from nature at all time, at all time. Right. Past, present, future. So we stand in the present, we hope. We remember the past, and we imagine the future. Well, sometimes it gets all really convoluted inside the present because that's exactly where we are at any time. Um, Maybe the understanding is that we create the universe every single moment, that there is no real past. It's only a memory because it only goes back so far. And then we conjecture everything else. We can take physics all the way back to the Big Bang, to when time supposedly started. Many physicists do that, although that concept is constantly changing. It's a very well thought out plan. It does seem to really come out of a materialistic universe. But when we get back down to where it all started, then there is the question, well, what happened before that? How can we conceive that? We've conceived all the way back through math, through thought experiments, and all this to go all the way back to the Big Bang, where everything started. And it's a theory. It's only a theory. It's an imagination. It's something that do we have the whole thing here? It's figured out quite well. Very, very a lot of different systems. Then the future. Where is the universe going? Where is time going into the future? Does it keep expanding or does it stop expanding? Does it fall back into itself to create another universe out of through another Big Bang when everything comes back together? Still, conjecture, ideas, plans, relative ideas, relative thinking creates this whole thing. I think when we come to Dogen's radical non-duality is where we're getting close to something. It's very interesting that it seems Buddhism can contain many different thought processes and many different ideas, structures, and things like that, especially physics and quantum physics. It seems to adapt and it seems to be able to hold these things. And in fact, some of quantum physics are based on ninth century writings of a Zen master. I would like to even talk about that at one point, have a talk on that, but that's a whole nother can of worms. I guess we could say Dharma worms. So anyway, we're back at the third sentence of this, and that sentence is, since the Buddha way by nature goes beyond the dichotomy of abundance and deficiency, there is no arising and persists perishing, delusion and realization, living beings and Buddhas. So there is no relative thinking here, no duality in this. This is what we have. We have relative thinking on one hand, we have absolute understanding on the other. Now, we can accept all these things very rationally, or we could accept these Buddhas. We open our mind, these certain ideas, these dharmas and teachings. I found myself really questioning my own set of values actually last night. I got into a conversation with one of my neighbors who's a flat earther. And we might view, even being Buddhist, that that is the height of delusion. I'm not going to make a statement on that either way, whether it's delusion or not. How much is real? How much is not real in that? But what I found is that when he started questioning my beliefs and kind of pushing me into a corner, I found myself getting quite frightened in a way. Could everything that I believe that there's worlds, the universe, the spinning, what do you call the spinning liquid planet is impossible? Um, that this has been a hoax perpetuated for 500 years. And I found myself entrenched in everything that I try to eliminate, to work through, to handle science, common knowledge, physics, all these things. I felt I'm being challenged. And with that challenge, I realized how much of my model of the world, of reality, I cling to, cause and effect, time, motion, gravity, all that sorts of thing. Um, and I found myself wanting to defend everything that I've learned from school, from science, from just walking around on the planet, thinking about things. Um, and yet we have quantum physicists actually questioning all these very things, all these models of the universe. And it's a little difficult to prove that they're wrong because they use a lot of different other understandings to bring that around. So how can I feel scared about, um, oh, sorry.
No, no,
It's okay. Okay, so why should I feel scared when a flat earther is encountering me and pushing me my buttons? Well, that's a really interesting place to be because then you feel like, well, I do rely on these notions, these fixed ideas, this relativity, this just to conduct life, just to live my life, to live in nature. And really, when you come down to it, do you really need that? Do I really need to know about gravity, the spinning wet planet, the orbs of the solar system, comets, to be able just to walk, to be able to sit and meditate, to be able to have dinner? We don't really need that. These are all add-ons. So the nature is being able to hold both things in your head, the relative and the absolute. And when do we do that? How do we do that? Well, it can't happen for very long. It happens in a moment. It happens in Kensho. It happens when lightning strikes. And when you're just completely immersed in the moment with no thinking, no time, no words, when one with nothingness can this property emerge. And it's a very rare thing. So how does one get up in the morning, make tea, get dressed, and go to work? Okay, well, that's all automatic. We don't have to worry about that. In fact, we don't have to worry about any of this. So, okay, let's see if I left anything out in there. Have I come up with? Okay, I see a hand up there, and I feel like this is a good place to end. So Spencer.
Okay. Um, the nature of reality, I guess you were saying the Koan brings that forth, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So, the first paragraph of the Genjo Koan, what is that saying?
Well, I only read the first three lines for this
Well,
talk.
if I were to tell you that the first paragraph gives it away,
Ah,
what do you know from the first three lines?
the first three lines, I know that a main principle that's here is that um, the radical duality of, well, let's see, how did I phrase that again? How was it phrased? It's the radical non-duality
Ah,
is that we can experience both relative and the absolute in a moment, and that this is about the only time that we can really realize and grasp what true reality is.
so that's so the Genjo Koan, the first paragraph is, you know, sort of broader than that, right? Like if you were to read those lines and see them as form is emptiness, emptiness is form is form, emptiness is emptiness, and the last line is beyond form and emptiness.
Exactly.
Well, if you saw that, that might be a broad categorization of reality, perhaps, right? I don't
Oh
know.
no, we say that all the time, and we memorize it.
Okay.
And it's almost, yes, go ahead.
And then the Genjo Koan goes on. I think a couple paragraphs down, we have some very specific learning there that we talk about a lot, right? To know the
Yes.
self is to forget the self. To forget the
Yes.
self is to be enlightened by the myriad things, the 10,000 things, right? So,
Mhm.
you know, basically all of this stuff with the flat earther, right?
Mhm. Yes.
All of this stuff with the flat earther is what's that about?
I'm talking about with the flat earther is that my own sense of habitual thinking and attachment to how I perceive the world, the universe, and all its scientific acuteness is so entrenched and in my nature that I don't think it's very hard to let go of. It's very hard to,
Can you let it go?
I can, I can let
Okay.
it go.
Because I think that's what Dogen's telling us is, if this kernel of self that's arguing with a flat earther is probably the dichotomy of a flat earther. You're 180 degrees off.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Right. So we just have to give it up. And
It's
it's hard.
it's true. That's really kind of what I was realizing is that in truth and absoluteness, even what they say, as we might consider delusion, it is still the truth because if everything is absolute, then even delusion is truth, and truth is delusion, and only by thinking it one way or another makes it so
Well,
in the
well,
relative world.
well, I think you gotta let that go. And
Yes.
I think the interesting thing is when we have these human interactions that are uneasy, let's say with flat earther or whomever, they affect us, right? Because we think there's something in us that thinks we're right, but there's something in us that knows we're wrong too. So we got to let it all go. Okay.
Exactly. 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 And that's the little part I feel like we all kind of keep. And it kind of hides from us because we're also clever at all the different ways of thinking about things. And our, we could say our ego, our superiority feelings are, well, everybody else says it, so it must be true kind of thing. Um, and yet, you're right, it has to go. It has to be let go to actually perceive what we could say the radical non-duality of reality.
Yeah. And look, you were talking about the absolute and reality, right? Form,
Yes.
absolute. Well, this is what we exist in kernels of both. But when Buddha, talks about I and all sentient beings simultaneously attain enlightenment, yeah, he allowed all of us to come through with him, right? But something gets stuck behind, right? And what's that something that gets stuck behind? That kernel of truth, right? So,
Mhm.
can you push that through? It just always seems to be there. So, at least for me, that's how I see it when I sit. So,
Okay. Thank you, Spencer. That was great. I'm glad you helped me elaborate on that. That was really wonderful.
thank you.
Yes. Mike.
From your talk, since illusion and awareness and things are the same because you can't have one without the other and stuff, then we don't want to throw away our relative understanding of reality because it does play a role in the sphere that we occupy, but we just don't get so attached to it and its outcomes and results because it is the other side of the ultimate. But we don't want to abandon it completely because then we've just chopped off one side of the coin. So we have to learn how to work with it because we are in the world of samsara, delusion, and all that. And this is what we have to work with, but we have to use it in such a way that we don't become assessed like the flat earther because he'll prove his point just as well as you'll disprove it. And so it comes down to the point is, okay, that's his world, I've got my world. I'm not going to get caught up in that battle. And so I sometimes get the impression from my experiences that the delusions we go through do have a useful purpose. And the I'm forgetting my words here, but basically is that we don't want to abandon either side because we're no longer in the middle way, we're no longer in the moment. The moment is both sides. That fast, both things exist. And we can't get rid of the other. We just have to learn how to use both in a, for lack of a better word, beneficial way for ourselves. In reality. So it's like suchness as is, or whatever, it's just what it is. We just teach ourselves to go, okay, that's that, flat earther, okay. But we go on, because that's his world. We're not trying to convert anybody, just, okay, fine, I have a very devout brother who is an ultimate, very devout Christian. Every time I visit him, he's trying to convert me, and I just smile and say thank you, but I'm okay. So I don't know if that relates properly with what you were discussing, but it's,
Oh no, it does. That you're right. That really does relate because when we come from a place of complete commitment to knowing something, I believe we're trying to kind of cover up our ignorance and persuade ourselves. So when we get too much talking about sin, too much I know what sin is, I think we fall into the same trap that's there that we see others who have fallen in. And we can name a bunch of different things in society because I think the way things have transpired with all the different types of media, that there can be so many different perspectives now. Nothing needs to be really, it only needs to agree with a few people for it to create a body of thought. In other words, it used to be that through, educate, well, basically, when we had less different distractions and different voices speaking, we could have, authority. Authority could be religion, and it could be government, and it could be um, teachers and educators. Now it's completely shifted all around. Everyone's kind of, we have a great opportunity to figure out what is reality in this big soup that's everyone can see at least one or two forms of thought that just don't make sense. And the flat earthers see us as with a round, wet world is not making any sense at all. And that's just an example because we can open up a page in a book and find, or on the newspaper and any social media feed, we find all sorts of different phases of reality. And yet we just have really, if we can strip away all our thinking to allow it to go, and it goes deep with us. And that's kind of what I was pointing at, that it's emotional. And that's what we always run in against with humans, is that it's always emotional. Whenever you talk to the people are very convinced. So I could be very convinced about Zen and many different things. And it's a totally emotional, reflective, habitual thing we keep referring to it in our heads. So finding a way for no thought, no complicated thinking, if that's possible.
that's where you let it go.
That's right. We'll go live in the Zendo and just think about making beds and eating, cooking lunch and things like that, and living a very simple life, which we all always seem to want to get back to. Yes, Chris.
So I liked your talk. I just wanted to state for the record, my theory is that the whole flat Earth thing, at least in its inception, was just a massive trolling of people online or otherwise. And I think that some people really believe it, which is, I kind of have a feeling of pity, I guess, about that. But the thing that I like about it, and the reason why I think it might be, just a big troll, so to speak, is what it does is it forces us to really accept that we don't know anything, or at least the things we know are a lot less than what we think we know. That, or more broadly, it asks us to come to terms with the criteria we use to consider that we know something. In other words, I believe in the photos taken from the space shuttle. I believe that a space shuttle went to space, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But at the end of the day, what do I actually know? What can be stated that it to be knowledge? And that's there's a whole like, I think epistemology is like the branch of philosophy that deals with that. And I think it also is a great illustration of, with regards to Zen practice, how radical non-attachment really gets. If we are to drop all of our attachments to our preconceived notions, all attachment to what we think we know, which I think is the task at hand on a grand scale in a life of Zen practice, I think that this is really a great illustration of how even things that seem obvious to us, even things that we know to be true, we have to let go of the attachment to that so-called knowledge. And even if we do let go of that knowledge, well, is the universe still here exactly as it was before we let go? Yes. Do we have as much control over the things in our life that we have any kind of control over? Yes. The oxygen is still gonna, nourish my cells, and also the free radicals are gonna, do their thing. Acai berries. But at the end of the day, if you hold firm to a round earth and the flat earther holds firm to a flat earth, you can still interact and live a life together. And that's because whether we're attached to the notions that we have constructed our reality out of or not, every one of us is living in our own reality, actually. And we want to believe that there's an objective reality that we all exist in, but how would we know that? The answer is we can't ever know that, but we want to feel like that we do know that. And so that's one of several reasons why challenges like that can get us so defensive, I think, anyway. But again, whether we're attached to our little realities or not, they are all completely separated from each other, and they also reflect each other in themselves, and they reflect themselves. And whether we're attached to them or not, the matter at hand is not affected. So whether the earth is flat or whether the earth is round, the great matter of birth and death is exactly the same, and coping with it or tussling with it is not going to be a different experience, I think, ultimately. And that's a lot of what I appreciated about your talk, was getting to that.
Good. That's great. Yes, I have to say that uh, it's how free can you be to and not attached to your preconceived notions. We can root them out and meditate them out and everything, but it takes sometimes testing by others to figure this out. Um, and really, it's this non-attachment is so difficult to reach for. In fact, it's really hard. You can hardly ever do it. It has to do with it happens. We strive, we practice. Practicing is part of it. We sit, we practice, but sometimes we get it when we least expect it. When we're not tried, it's there. And it usually is a sound, a sight, a smell, an image could come, but it's something that's right there in the moment that opens it up and opens the moment up when there's no thinking there. And then we realize how absolute it is. And then once we think that, it's gone. It closes up very quickly, and you might have it for a fraction of a second, and you just feel good for a moment, and that release, that freedom is really, really key. We don't have to live through ideas to have that.
I had a real quick story.
Sure.
I worked in construction And I had long hair and I had an earring, big old quarter-size earring in my left ear. And there was a guy that worked on the crew that took redneck to a whole new level. He was in Pearl Harbor when it attacked. He had his hair buzz cut it, stuff like this, and nobody would work with this guy because he was a complete jerk. And my brother was my supervisor and said, "You're gonna work with this guy, don't let him get to you. We need this job done," stuff like that. And we met on the job site and he looked at me and I looked at him and he goes, "You know what? That earring, I'm gonna call you Dippy. Because you're a Dippy." I said, "Okay, I'm gonna call you Redneck. You're a redneck." He held out his hand, he goes, "We're gonna get along just fine." And we go along perfectly. Nobody still could work with this guy because we both realized where we stood. And it was like, okay, yeah, I'm not gonna change you, you're not gonna change me. And we go about, and that was one of those lessons where you sit there and go, that's where you have to let go of stuff, because I was sitting there, I had all this red, look at that guy's haircut, he's gonna be a jerk. Yeah, he could be, but we got along just fine. And, he stayed in touch with me until he died, it was like.
Isn't that right? Yeah. Well, this is something that I've really been concerned about in society and in life and living, is that we have forgotten how to do that. We've forgotten how to live amongst ourselves with our differences and to treat each other as humans. Because I find that many people's ideas are very baked in, because I think what's happened is that we have so many different sources. People have to define themselves intellectually almost first and create an identity that they stick to, and then they follow this. And then I think with the way the social medias work, they're creating more confusion. Yes.
I think that really appreciating that each of us lives in our own reality is, or at least can be, helpful in doing that, in living with each other, because we're letting go of the need to agree, because we understand that we can't ultimately agree on everything.
Yeah, you're right. There's a sense that we don't exist unless we have very firm ideas, left, right, center, and we're not going to get along, and so we're just not going to get along, and we're just going to live on our kind of a rash, impulsive, emotional place that is actually self-destructive in many different levels. So I hope that this has helped bring a little bit of I don't know. This is something I think is really important for people to understand in our society, for us to get along in the next few years. So I have friends that are like, I'm just not into politics anymore. And they're like, they get mad at me. They want to push me into a corner to be upset.
Well, they want their realities to not be threatened by the existence of a different reality.
They want you to confirm their reality.
Yeah.
And they consider it a challenge when you
Yes.
don't.
It's true. We have to confirm reality before we confirm that we're humans and we're living in the same space. We have the same needs. We have the same loves. We have all these things in common, and we're ignoring it.
Jane, you got anything to throw in here?
Oh, well, I was just thinking, listening to everybody, that if you argue with a flat earther, a flat earther is talking from his head, right? From all the things that he's heard and believes. But we do the same thing. We have TV showing around Earth. We have photographs showing around Earth. We have airplane trips showing around Earth. But we're also following all the things we've heard and believe. So it becomes a question of, do your beliefs, are they more real than the flat earthers' beliefs? Because there's also a theory, I don't know much about this, but it's interesting. In I can't think of what the study is even, but it's in physics, I guess. But it's like string theory, and that there are flat planes of Earth that exist as realities, and that maybe people have been hearing things like that and think, well, my truth is stronger than yours truth, and my beliefs have more reality than your beliefs have, therefore I must be more true. But we have more pictures on TV and plane trips and things, and so we feel kind of pity for the person who believes in that their beliefs are this big and you think your beliefs are this big. And so
We're on the winning team.
that's what it comes down to. But the real thing is very few of us have tasted anything firsthand.
Yeah.
So the real problem is that it's not being firsthand. And so maybe the firsthand experience is like if you were going to argue food now, I think that would be a much more real argument because most of you have
It
tasted
is.
food and thought about firsthand experience. So when you talk about food, you talk about firsthand experience and you don't get into head trips at all. So I think the real problem is none of us have had enough firsthand experience, and that getting into an argument with anybody is a waste of time until we do.
I would say
so
that
when you talk to a flat earther, get them into the subject of food and watch how the temperature changes.
Well, Mark wants us to talk now.
Well,
Okay.
it makes me think about, like, my daughter, I think she likes to argue. You know, so it makes me think of when a flat earther comes to you with this strong point of view. I guess it makes me think that we don't have to get into the space of having an argument about it even, you know? It's like that's kind of taking on their reality of let's stand fast with our beliefs, you know. I guess another way to go about it is to, you know, maybe disconnect from the notion of having an argument at all, you know what I mean? Just because they're standing fast to their side doesn't mean that we have to do the same, I guess.
Well,
The next time a flat earther asks you, challenges you, just ask them, do you like figs?
Yeah.
And watch the emotion change.
Yeah.
You like pasta?
Yeah.
Do you like pasta?
okay, so we're getting kind of on here, and I think we're going to wrap it up in just a moment. So, but I would have to say that, yeah, that is true. We don't have to argue about things. In fact, all we have to do is address people on a human scale. And because we can't wrestle these ideas, they're not logical. They're like I'm saying, they're entrenched. They're part of the core of the person. And as I experienced my own. So I think there is no other solution but to recognize and hear the people, but hear them where we really listen to them. What are they really saying? What is the angst and the need to persuade? Where's that coming from? It's very difficult, but I think we're all going to have to learn this a lot in the next few years.
I think so. Thank you.
Thank you so much for indulging me again.